Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. I hope you're staying safe with COVID-19 making its resurgence. I know Boston, you know him as Austin Ward. I know him as Boston Ward. Boston, you're staying safe, right?
Doing the best we can. Wearing masks out. We still want to go out and do human things. I get the urge. Everyone's got that. We took Liberty to the zoo yesterday, but I was actually really impressed. I mean, I know that that's sort of the mandate now in Ohio, but even outside, people wearing masks at the zoo, and that was good to see. I think, people want their lives to continue. Totally understandable. We're in that boat too, but with that, you have to make some sacrifices. Yeah, it was hot. I didn't love having a mask on in the 90-degree heat, but you got to do what you got to do.
What does an orangutan look like with a mask on? And what kind of mask do they put on the elephants and the hippos?
I didn't get close enough to tell. I think that they were just outdoors and maintaining social distancing. You don't want to get too close to an elephant anyway. So I think we were definitely 6 feet away. We were safe there.
Well, outdoors and loving it is what you're trying to say. That's what they were doing. With big entities in mind, that's my segue into my conversation. I've got a conversation coming with Jack Mewhort, former Ohio State lineman, former Indianapolis Colts lineman, now out of the NFL. But we're going to talk about, on the conversation, we talk about how big guys, especially, what kind of precautions they can take in this situation, and really what kind of jeopardy he thinks these players are facing, both in the NFL camps and college football camps, because he's been in both of them. And we all know, the news this week that broke this week, at the beginning of this week, of the Miami Marlins, suddenly having upwards of 12 or more players testing positive for COVID-19, which has sent the whole sports world into a tizzy about whether this can work or not. Meanwhile, the EPL and a lot of these other leagues have continued to play with sort of no catastrophic problems, but now people are questioning, because of the Miami Marlins breach, whether or not there can be a college football season. You and I are going to talk about that when I get back from this conversation with Jack Mewhort. But there are a lot of, as a juggler would say, there are a lot of balls up in the air right now, right?
Yeah, I think probably people have noticed the tenor of this show changing a little bit from the really optimistic tone that we had a month ago to every single week and every Tuesday morning when this comes out. It seems like another wave of bad news and setbacks, and it didn't stop. This weekend was not good for any kind of sport, really, but yeah. Especially in this country. As you said, other countries have had success. Really, the bubbles have had success. MLS and their tournament is working. So far, the NBA seems to have a pretty good plan. We'll see what happens with the NHL this week. But baseball, man, they didn't make it more than 4 days without a setback.
The key in this is, as I have trumpeted since the whole thing began, is a 7-letter word: vaccine. Until you get that a plausible, a working vaccine going and distribute it, we're going to be having these discussions, because you can, one person can infiltrate a locker room and suddenly you got 12 people with it. I mean, you've got an NBA player that was off on leave or something and went to a strip club, for some reason, now could have been one of those strip clubs that's partitioned off, but like, I was going to say that'd be an interesting scene to see. But the bottom line is, you're only as strong as your weakest link, which we've been saying all along here. If everybody takes it seriously, stays out of harm's way, okay, that's good for your team. But is the other team doing the same thing? You got the Phillies that just played the Marlins. They're under. We'll get into that. But first I want to talk with a guy who's been in college and pro football locker rooms as a player, and can give some insight into what maybe the challenges are going forward with the possibility of a football season this year. Jack Mewhort, and then we'll be back right after that to further the conversation with Boston. And as promised, ladies and gentlemen, a blast from the past in terms of Ohio State football is concerned. I've got Jack Mewhort, former star lineman for the Buckeyes before he went on to a really good career with the Indianapolis Colts before, I guess, injuries kind of short-circuited your career, right, Jack?
Yeah, I would have played 100 years if my body would have held up. You know, I think that's the goal. You go in thinking you're Superman, and then reality catches up with you a little bit. But no, I couldn't have asked to play in a better city. I had a great 4-year career here in Indianapolis. Was able to be on the field, you know, a ton. But, you know, the downside of that is that your body gets worn out quickly. So, yeah.
But hey, thanks for coming on my podcast, my man. You know, we hooked up earlier this month at when we did that 2012 tribute that Urban Meyer wanted done, because when he got named the coach of the decade for the 2010s in the Big Ten, ironically, he never got named coach of the year, but he got named coach of the decade by the Big Ten Network. You know, we wanted several of you guys who were key members of that team on, and we got together at his Urban Meyer's Pint House over here in Dublin, Ohio. And but I just, you know, I hadn't seen you for a while, and I really appreciate you joining us that night. But what was that? Just give me a little insight. As you drove back to Indy after that, what were the thoughts that were going through your head from the standpoint of having been part of something special, an undefeated team, one of only 6 teams in Ohio State history that have gone unbeaten, untied?
Well, first of all, it was great to see everybody, including you. You know, you were a big part of that year as well. You know, you were around, you know, every day covering it, and, you know, being back there, seeing Coach and seeing Evan and Jake and Reed and CJ. I mean, it was just a blast. And, you know, going down memory lane with those guys, it was emotional, and reliving some of those memories, and, you know, some things that guys bring up things that you don't quite remember, or, you know, you hear Coach tell a story from his perspective. It was a really cool experience over at Coach Meyer's Pine House. So that was a great time. And, you know, just reflecting on the ride back to Indy, you know, the more years that, you know, you put between you and those experiences, you know, they do start to dull a little bit. So it's always good to get together and relive the glory days, so to speak. So now that I'm old and washed up, you know, those are the things that I have to lean on, and doing stuff like that's a blast. So that was a great time.
Yeah, it must be tough to be old and washed up. Old man by the time I'm 40. I keep thinking of coal miner's daughter, Tommy Lee Jones. But I want to ask, you know, before we get into what I really wanted you to talk about, which is the challenges these players, especially the big guys, are facing with this COVID-19 situation. As you look back, you know, there are guys who will tell tales. You know, Alabama football, guys tell tales still about playing for Bear Bryant, you know, Ohio State, you know, Rex Kern, all these guys about playing for Woody Hayes. You know where I'm going with this question. As you look back now, do you feel like you played for one of the sport's great coaches of all time? But just what is your sense of playing for Urban Meyer? You know, obviously Jim Trussell too is in that conversation, but we were specifically talking about that 2012 team. But something special happened right from the start with this guy. You know, and do you have a sense that you were playing for one of the great coaches of all time?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago when we got together. But, you know, by the time Coach Meyer got to Ohio State, he was well documented as one of the, you know, rising stars. Not even – he was passed out already. He'd won 2 national championships in Gainesville. So, you know, he was Urban Meyer, as I said, before he got to Ohio State. I think what he did at Ohio State cemented him in the pantheon of, you know, the greatest college football coaches of all time. Yeah. And I was fortunate to be there at the very beginning of that. And, you know, as I tell these stories, the older I get, the more it sounds like, oh, the back in my day, you know, it's tough, I think, sometimes for guys to believe, the younger guys to believe, you know, what it was like in those early days. But it was all true. And you know what? It was hard, and there was a dark cloud over the program, and there were days, you know, you didn't know how you were going to get through the day. But all those things were building blocks to, you know, not only going 12-0, but, you know, the culture, and, you know, teaching the guys that came after us, hey, this is how it's done. This is what we went through, and we're going to show you what that was like so you can teach the next guys. And, you know, culture is self-perpetuating, and that's Coach Meyer and Coach Marotti. Excuse me. That's their biggest thing. It's all about culture, right? And when they got there, the culture had slipped a little bit. You mentioned Coach Trussell. I mean, he was the same way. He was a culture-driven guy. His programs had the right leaders, doing the right things. And, you know, I had the benefit of already, you know, having played for him, and then to step into a culture with Coach Meyer was just, you can see why he's won everywhere he's been.
Yeah. Hey, indulge me one more question about that. What is it that's different about Urban Meyer? And forget about comparing him to Coach Dressel or Coach Pickle. Coach Pickle got dealt a bad hand. You know what I mean? That was a tough situation there. You well know that. But what is it that sets Coach Meyer apart, in your opinion? Meaning, why is he special?
To me, in a Coach Meyer-led program, there's nowhere to hide. Everything you do, from the classroom to the weight room to the practice field to Saturday in front of 110,000 people, everything is documented and charted for your peers to evaluate. And you become aware of the fact that it's not about you. It's not about how you feel. It's not about. It's about holding up your end of the bargain for the guy next to you, and that's the way he put his programs together. And you knew where you stood every day when you walked in there. Yeah. You knew, okay, well, based on what I've done today in the classroom, yesterday in practice, this morning in the weight room, that's how I'm valued in this program. And it was tough, man, and it was competitive, but that's how you get guys to rise to the top. And to be judged, I don't know if judge is the right word, but judged, evaluated, whatever it may be, on a daily basis like that, on everything you do, there's no room for the little things to slip. Everything you do is the Super Bowl that day. So I think that culture of just having nowhere to hide really brings the best out in players.
Yeah, that's what my favorite line about when people ask me to summarize Urban Meyer's approach is, don't tell me what you've done, tell me what you're doing, or show me what you're doing, and what are you going to do down the road? It's always about now and tomorrow, not about yesterday. Hey, speaking of that, and this is a tough segue, but can you imagine being right now going to an NFL training camp or going into a college football training facility right now with this question about COVID-19 hanging over things? I know you've thought about this because you're a thinking man, but what are the challenges these players are dealing with just from a mental or concentration standpoint, do you think?
I think the NFL guys are fine. I think it would be tough to be a rookie stepping into this, coming from a college program, but the veterans in the NFL, they're used to being on their own. They're used to training in different places and, piecemealing workouts together and, doing the customizable things that are, every NFL guy knows what they have to do personally to be prepared for the season. So it's a little easier in that regard. As a college kid, you're depending on that schedule to be in your hand every day that says, hey, be here at this time, and this is what's expected of you. And when you don't have that as an 18 to 22-year-old, it's I could see it being a little tough because that's how you build. That's how when you transition to the NFL, you're leaning on that foundation that was built for you in college. So to not have that and not be together as a group and not grinding together, I think the camaraderie is huge. And to not have that, it would be a struggle for me just because I'm such a locker room, team-oriented guy. I like, cutting my tape off after practice and sitting there and with Andrew Norwell and Corey Lindsley for an extra hour when I don't have to. So I think it's the things like that I would miss the most. And just not being on campus, not being together and, preparing with the uncertainty of, I don't know if the season's going to happen or not, So it's just, I don't know because I'm not going through it, but the mindset, it's just, I don't know. I don't know where these guys are, where they stand. And I know they have great coaches and great leaders around them that are, helping them put one foot in front of the other. But, at the same time, those coaches, they have the same amount of uncertainty. Nobody has the answer right now. So I feel for them. I hope there's a season, but, and I know they're tough enough to grind through it, but, it's just, it would be bizarre preparing for a football season, not knowing what tomorrow holds.
All right, you're a thinking man, like I said. I've always thought you were intelligent, but if you're not, just let me know right now. But do you think it's folly to be trying to have a football season right now with the uncertainties and with the unknown about the COVID-19? And what now that you're out of it, as you look at it, what's your sense of that?
Like I said, nobody's got the answers, including me. every day this thing looks more and more serious, and I never want to discount the seriousness because people have lost their lives. Lots of people have lost their lives, and the numbers,
Right.
show it. And, at the same time, as a guy who football has done so much for me and opened so many doors for me in my life, I don't know if I was a junior or a senior in college getting ready to be done, how that would have affected me. And not only that, but these universities depend on the revenue from football. So I can't say that there's a right answer. I think you can try to contain it. And I know, just over at school, they're taking temperatures and they're limiting guys in the facility, and they're taking every precaution because, if one guy with, a compromised immune system who maybe doesn't know he has a compromised immune system gets it and loses his life, or, seriously, it's not worth it. At the end of the day, it is a game. But it's such a strange line to walk. I think what the NBA is doing with the bubble is cool and creative, but you see guys not taking that seriously as well. So,
Right.
Tim, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. As a guy who loves football selfishly, I want to turn the TV on Saturday and watch 20 football games. But I also don't know that the benefits outweigh the risk to human life. So, there are people a lot smarter than me working on this, and I'm excited to see what they put together. Hopefully it's creative and they can do it in a safe manner. But if not, you can't knock them for it just because it is a matter of life and death.
What have the linemen in particular, what have they missed out on that will be hard to replicate or duplicate or make up for over the last several months of not having that rigid almost every day? No, they've been working out, the last month or so, but only 9 at a time. What have they missed out on from an edge standpoint that you think will take some getting some rust off as a season begins or as a preseason camp begins? You guys were almost can till can't is my favorite line about working out back, especially when Urban Meyer showed up. So what are the challenges, especially for the big guys?
An offensive line operates as a unit. It's 5 individuals on the field simultaneously operating as a unit. And I think when you don't have those practices and those workouts together, you lose a little bit of that ability to gel early in the season.
Yeah.
Every year, by the time we got to our first game, I knew exactly what Andrew Norwell was going to do before he did it. I knew, which way Corey Lindley, what was going to come out of his mouth, Corey Lindsley's mouth before he said it. I knew that when we ran power, Marcus Hall was going to pull around and I was going to feel him on my hip doing this, So it was, and those were things you build at 6 a.m. in the off season during workouts, and you build them during spring ball. And, you figure guys out during this time in the summer when you're going out there and grinding, and, you show your teammates you're the man for the job and you're mentally tough and you're going to show up for them when times are tough. So, I think offensive linemen just in particular are going to miss a little bit of that. And that's not to say they can't accelerate it when they get into camp. But also it's the just going out to eat after a workout in the social aspect of it. I think that's such a big side of offensive line play and trusting guys on and off the field. So it'll be interesting to see. And a lot of these Ohio State guys have known each other, played with each other for a bunch of years, so it may not be that big of a deal. But I know for me that would be the difficult part of it.
But when you heard some of these guys were, throwing different things around back in April and May and trying to lift weights, I mean, you can't get a more complete weight room than Ohio State's got, and instead you're trying to do it with milk jugs or something. I mean, how much do you think, just put yourself in their shoes, how much would they have lost from just a physical edge standpoint for those 3 months?
Yeah, absolutely, you're absolutely right. Lifting weights is so critical to playing football at a high level, not only for the strength side of it, but for the injury prevention. Being strong and building that muscle in the right places is so critical to making it through a 12-game season, in the NFL a 16-game season, a 17-game season. So that part of it I think is huge. But the good thing is that everybody's doing the same thing, right? Nobody's got access to their facility. Everyone's doing the same, push-ups, pull-ups, whatever, air squats, doing sit-ups. It's like Rocky or something. They're in the meat cooler punching the So
Out of beef.
yeah, right, exactly. So I think the good news is that everyone's on an even playing field trying to figure out, how to get their offseason program in. But, as a guy who had injury and, kind of lived in the weight room trying to rehab through injury and get strong enough to get back on the field, those injured guys, there's some of those guys who are depending on being in that facility and being with the trainers and being able to push weight just to get to a point where they're strong enough to step foot back on the field. So I think that's another aspect of it. But at the same time, I know there are guys, like I said, in that facility putting programs together and getting creative, and I know they're doing everything they can. So the good news is, like I said, everybody's on the same playing field across the country.
Hey, last thing. What do you miss most about? I mean, what do you do for a living? What are you doing? I'm not sure you have to do anything for a living. The great thing I was thinking about when Wyatt Davis, his grandfather Willie Davis, died earlier this year. He was one of my favorite players when I was growing up in the '60s. Played for the Green Bay Packers, superstar defensive end. A guy like that would have made 10, 20, 30 millions of dollars, would never had to work again in his life, but he had to have an off-season job, you know what I mean, things like that. You guys don't necessarily have that challenge, but what are you doing to bide your time now? What are you doing to make a living, et cetera, and how much do you miss football?
Yeah, I miss it a ton. I think, I still think about, I was driving home from Ohio yesterday, and I was sitting in the car just thinking, like, man, is this a bad dream? Am I going to wake up in that locker room tomorrow and you have moments like that where it's tough, and it's still pretty fresh for me. I'm 18 months, 2 years removed from walking out of training camp here in Indy, but it's, I have dreams where I wake up and I was playing football. It's like, man, you can't believe it's over, because you pour so much time and energy and dedication into one thing, and then you snap your fingers and it's gone. But, the great part is the relationships remain, right? I made so many strong connections with people along the way, coaches, teammates, staff, that's the stuff that to me is the most important. But then I think the other side of that coin is, you talked about what you're doing afterwards. It's, finding something else to be passionate about. The one thing I always wanted to do my entire life was play professional football. And I got to do that. I lived the dream, and I'm beyond lucky and grateful that I got to do that. And I'm also grateful that I get to turn the page and go be passionate about something else. And so for me right now, like every other retired offensive lineman in the world, I'm in commercial real estate. So I'm doing commercial real estate investments over here in Indianapolis, and I love it. It's competitive, and you find ways to compete, and you find ways to benchmark yourself, just like football. So it's about taking the stuff you learn, playing ball, and applying it to the next page. So I was compensated beyond fairly playing football. I'm not bitter. I have no regrets, and I have the ability to go chase something that I want to do, as opposed to, provide for, a huge family and live paycheck to paycheck. So I'm beyond grateful for what the game's provided for me. And I wish I could have done it, like I said, for 100 years, but I'm so grateful that, I can turn the page and go on to the next thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, $1 Million Listings, Indy.
Yeah, right. Call me.
Hey, that's one of my favorite. Two of my favorite shows are $1 Million Listings LA and $1 Million Listings New York, Manhattan or whatever it is, New York.
Tracy Tudor.
Oh yeah, man, I love those shows, brother. Hey, last thing, is it amazing, Jack, now as you look back, that you achieved your dreams? I mean, from standpoint of you got to the NFL. Is it, as you look back on it now, did that go by in a flash, or was it? And how cool is it to know that no matter what comes now, you did get to where you wanted to get at one point?
Yeah, it went by too quickly. Every day seemed like it was so long, and you're wondering, you're in training camp going, playing against, Robert Mathis and guys like, you're going out there on Sundays and playing against Vince Wilfork. And you're like, man, I don't know how I'm going to, get ready for this or prepare for this. But at the same time, it was, every day was the most fun I ever had. I was in a facility. I lucked out. Got to play on a team with some guys that are still my best friends to this day. Play for a family like the Ursays, who have been beyond generous to me. So it did go by too quickly, but like I said, those relationships remain, and it's about turning the page and finding what's next. And I'll always have that, but someday I'm going to hopefully have a kid who's going to look at me and say, Dad, well, what'd you do? And I hope it's something more than, well, I got lucky and I played 4 years in the NFL. So that's what I'm doing now, is trying to find that next thing so I can leave a legacy of something more than football. And obviously that's my crowning achievement to this point, but I hope that's not the end of my story.
Kid, you see that big building over there? I sold that.
Exactly,
man. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Jack Mewhort. Jack, thanks for coming on the Tim May podcast, my man. And we're going to do this some more, man. I really appreciate this hookup.
No, man, I appreciate you having me. It's always good to see you. Glad to be with you, and glad to see you're doing big things, man. You don't age at all. I think I told you last time I saw you. You still look the same as you did in 2009. So
yeah,
keep
I got
going,
that Warren Beatty soft focus going right now. You know what I'm saying on the video. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Mewhort. Thanks a lot, Jack.
All right, see you, Tim.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Truly appreciate Jack Mewhort, one of my favorite players. I know I say that every time I have a player on, but I've had a lot of favorite players at Ohio State, and Jack certainly fits that bill, right, Boston?
Well, you're kind of like Urban Meyer, where all of your top end players that you've covered or coached for Urban's case are the favorites. And look, there's a reason he kept a Jack Mewhort jersey in his office. Basically since he left after the 2013 season, he held him up as one of the prime examples of leadership. And I think part of it too is something we talked about at the Pint House a few weeks ago, is that it wasn't a smooth ride. Jack Mewhort and Jake Stoneburner had their scholarship taken away. They had to earn it back.
God, oh man, for want of a porta potty, but go ahead.
But for Mewhort to go through something like that at the start, and then to be 18 months later hailed as one of the all-time great leaders of Urban Meyer's career, and he, there's 150 NFL jerseys he could have put in that office, or Florida or Ohio State jerseys or Bowling Green or whoever. He had a Jack Mewhort in there, a John Simon jersey for a little while in there too, and some of them changed out. But man, Mewhort, when he was around, was one of the most respected guys that you're ever going to deal with. It's totally fair to have him on that short list like you do, Tim. He is a great guy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And let's get into what we're talking about, though. We teased it before the Mewhort interview, and you heard his 2 cents worth. But the news that the Miami Marlins, Major League Baseball team, has had his problems now, where upwards of 12 or more players tested positive coronavirus, causing cancellations of games. Like I was teased earlier, and we talked about this on several of these podcasts in the past couple of weeks, because of the way the Big Ten announced that it was going to an all-conference, intra-conference scheduling this year. And, of course, in the Pac-12 followed suit. I would expect by the end of this week, we're going to hear a definitive word from the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12, which may be along similar lines. We'll see. They may play one out-of-conference game each. We'll see where that goes. I mean, some people are being really brazen about this, but, it's kind of time to put up or shut up when it comes to scheduling, et cetera. But, the thing about the Big Ten was, they said they would like to play an intra-conference schedule, didn't guarantee it. And then number two, the reason you want to do that is it gives you the flexibility if suddenly a team gets hit by a spate of COVID-19 infections or positive tests, that you can postpone games, et cetera. And that's the luxury that football has that almost every other sport doesn't, because almost every other sport is a continuum. I mean, you play almost one game either every day or every other day or every third day, like in the NHL or NBA standpoint. But, you could put off a football game for 2 weeks, and especially if you're limiting, for example, the attendance in the stands, you're going to be affecting half or maybe even, fewer people than you would be in a regular season situation. How the ticket distribution is going to be handled, that's a podcast for another day, because that hasn't even been announced. But the flexibility that college football could have to either start on September or August 29th or September the 5th, all the way to play it to who knows when, December or January. That's why I think there still is the possibility of a college football season in some form or fashion. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it should come as a surprise to anybody that Major League Baseball was the least equipped and least successful so far in the rollout. I mean, they have been all over the map and completely disorganized from day one. So that doesn't come as a big surprise to me, especially because they abandoned some plans that would, play in spring training sites and to form some sort of bubble. The fact that they were trying to continue to play across the country, really not feasible right now. The places where you're having success, it's early for the NBA. We'll see when it really starts ramping up what happens for them. But MLS, other than two teams that had to withdraw, thanks to Dallas, which was reported that they had a going away party before they went to the quarantine and in the bubble. Oh wow, shocker that didn't work out for them, and they withdrew. But MLS hasn't had any positive tests since they got in the bubble. Really, since then, the Crew had one, I think flagged, didn't turn out. They went through, so far a couple weeks into it without any issues. We'll see if the NHL, also a bubble, how that works as the Blue Jackets left on Sunday, to get there. We'll see how that approach works. But you look at, if you don't limit the contact outside of your team, you're going to have these problems. It's not a shock that baseball dealt with that right away. I think what was more interesting to me over the weekend was there's been this rush and push to get that schedule out for the Big Ten. Well, you already got a test of the needing that flexibility when both Rutgers and Michigan State put the entire team in quarantine.
Yeah,
they're not able to do the 2-week walkthrough period. That could set back the start of their training camp. You might be looking at a situation right now for Michigan State. Like, we talk about Rutgers every week. I don't believe that Rutgers is going to be able to play at all. Michigan State, they can't play really in week 1 or week 2 now.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think, because they want to have the same opportunities that the rest of the Big Ten had with 2 weeks of easing in and then a full training camp. So they already need that flexibility if they're going to even play week 1 or a first game. Excuse me.
No, you're exactly right. Like you and I've talked about several times on this, and I'll reiterate: if it was just your team that you had to worry about, you could handle situations. This could be copacetic, but you're going to try to get your team ready to play against another team that has to take the same disciplined approach of keeping this thing out. And that's why it is so up in the air about what's coming around the corner, because you have no clue what's coming around the corner, whether or not the other program is taking things, quote, as seriously as you are. But like we just pointed out, one breach by one person can upset the whole apple cart for a whole team. And, and the other thing I'm really interested in, I haven't gotten, people I've talked to haven't gotten real clear guidance on this, is there has to be some discussion on what constitutes a COVID-19 outbreak on your team to suffice causing you to have to postpone a game. I'm talking about in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And there's been some discussion, but like I said, earlier, if you only have 5 guys that get it on your team, does that suffice? But if 4 of those 5 guys are your 4 quarterbacks, it's a total different look at things.
Yeah, I think one reason that we haven't heard a number on that, Tim, is just exactly what we saw at Michigan State.
Yeah.
They reported that it was 6 positive tests and then shut down the whole team. The reason for that is going to be, even if you come up with the most genius practice structure, 1s versus 3s, 2s and scout team, and everybody's separate, so that so that you can try and limit. When you're contact tracing a team, you're gonna have a team that all needs to go into quarantine. That's what happened with Michigan State. That's what happened with Rutgers. They didn't have 37 positive tests. They didn't have the kind of outbreak that Clemson had, back in June with huge numbers of tests. If the NCAA and the Power 5 leagues then adopt what the NCAA recommended, with if you have contact exposure and then you go into a 14-day quarantine, you cannot have a football season because of what we just saw over the weekend. Yeah. The whole team is going to have to go. The whole coaching staff is going to have to go. There's no way that you can properly prepare to play football with 14-day quarantine for these guys. I get people that are – I'm not advocating for that. I want them to play college football. The football players themselves want to play. We've talked to enough of them, current former players. If you ask them to sign a waiver, they're not worried about getting COVID-19. They're young. They're in the best shape of their lives. If they think they might have a day of sickness, they're okay with that. But for a college to take that risk, and for multiple colleges, 130 to take the risk, They're just not going to do it. And I don't see how there's a way forward, because you don't have to say 4 quarterbacks or 10 starting players to cancel a game, because I think there won't be situations like that, because contact tracing is going to rule out if you have 5, then that number suddenly becomes 50 on its own.
Yeah. Ohio State toyed with the idea of when they had the players coming back for voluntary workouts back on what was that, June the 8th.
Yeah.
Do I have I have the June the 8th, July the 8th. What am I remembering?
Yeah, when they came back.
Yeah, of having them maybe in either a dorm that's been sanitized or a hotel that's been sanitized, one to a room, so that it would make it, but then they figured out that the cost of that would be over the top,
Right.
But I don't know, when they open camp, they always go to a hotel, obviously. When they open camp, right now, I think is August 7th is the date.
Right.
But, that weekend or that area. But the bottom line is, it'll be interesting to see whether they go to one person to a room, but then would they consider, for example, maintaining that? They always break camp just the week before the season opener. They break and they come out of the hotel after a couple of weeks. Maybe, they haven't gotten final word on whether Ohio State's actually going to try to maybe extend that. But this is so, it's almost kind of like watching a cat chase its tail a little bit. It's chasing its tail, and feeling pretty good about itself. And all of a sudden it bites its own tail, and goes, oh my God, what did I just do? And it only takes 1 or 2 positive tests. Like you said, the tracing begins. Suddenly you've got 10 guys in quarantine because they were around that one guy or those 2 guys. And then who were they around? And like you're saying, just when you think this season can happen, you think deeper into it, and you go, there's no freaking way without a vaccine.
Yeah, I don't think that the logistics work, and I can't stress this enough. There's all these people that say that it's doom and gloom, or that we're all overreacting. This isn't a political. Now,
let me interrupt you, but you're exactly right. What you're leading up to is this: we can say that these guys are in the best shape of their life. That they might have 1 or 2 days of discomfort, but dude, there could be players who get violently ill, perhaps even. The worst case scenario, you don't want that on your conscience. Gene Smith doesn't want to be thinking about that. Neither does Ryan Day. Neither do the parents of the players. And the players, if you really sat down in a corner and thought about it, they don't either. That's what's so maddening about this COVID-19 situation.
I think that nobody anywhere wants football more than me. I mean, the players obviously are invested. The coaching staff, Ohio State, wants to make that money. Like I want football just as badly as anybody. And I also see all those other arguments that people say, well, the symptoms won't be so bad. The players are young. They would, and I know for a fact that they would want to play the game, and they'd sign off on it if they get a chance to do what they love and set themselves up for an NFL career. And, players play through the flu all the time, and they're lauded for making that effort and taking an IV and then going out there and play. How is that different? I don't argue with any of those opinions, any of those facts. All of that is completely fair to ask and wonder, and nobody knows the right way 100% to handle this until, as you said, there's a vaccine and we can move on from there. Now, is everyone going to take the vaccine? Does that eliminate it 100%? I don't know. That's not my expertise. I'm not here to talk about it.
Oh, no, but when I got the flu shot last year, I felt pretty good about myself about not getting the flu. You can still get the flu, but I felt pretty good that my body was equipped to battle, to handle the situation. You get a COVID-19, this is all about confidence as much as anything else. But this has consequences. Like I said, you can just get a cough, or you can feel bad or lose your, let's say, your sense of smell for a day or two. Or it can be, I'm talking about COVID-19, or it can be a lot worse than that. There's no guarantee just because you're in great shape that you're going to just plow through it. If there was that guarantee, then NBA, MLS, all these places would just keep playing. They're not the MLB. They would just keep playing. There's no guarantee what is going to come down the pike for you, and that's what's, like I said, maddening about it.
Yeah, and I think that's that's been the hardest part for me to get there, is that I want there to be football, and I understand that players are willing to play it, but you can't – the parameters that are going to be set out for the community as a whole, they're not – I just don't see how they're going to allow it. And I can just sense a bunch of people turning us off because this has become a bad news show, but it's not even about the athletic directors, and it's not going to be about the players being willing to play if you could somehow get them to sign a waiver, which they'll never get to that point in the college ranks either. But
right,
local governments, you talked about them allowing, people to come in and sell tickets, and Ohio State has, some proposals out there that they're trying to, maneuver so that they can put people in the horseshoe this year. I just don't. I don't think that that's going to be allowed to happen. I don't think that the size gatherings. I think the way that we're going right now, they're going to have to, or they will be taking another step, if not in Ohio, again to go to Rutgers. There's just no way you can play Rutgers right now. And we talked about this early on. Would the Big Ten play a season without 14 teams? If they're going to, I think they would have to do that. There are too many hurdles in the footprint, Big Ten footprint right now to allow it to happen. And that's without – they're going to put out a schedule at some point probably this week. They're going to keep acting as if everything is on track. Ohio State, hey, they've got positive news. They didn't have, anybody, withdraw from the workouts last week.
Right.
Training camp starting on the 7th. All that stuff is on track, but if you don't have opponents that you can play, that's going to be all for naught. And I've become – I don't
know. I think a lot of fans would. I think a lot of fans would pay to go in and watch Ohio State play Ohio State. A couple of times in the fall, as opposed to like seeing no football at all. Maybe that's where we're headed. Developmental league. The ones versus twos and et cetera. Huh?
5 scrimmages.
You'd go watch that, wouldn't you? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, any football fan would, true football fan, but
you can charge me whatever. And I normally hate the spring game.
Yeah.
But I would say
the last thing I want to see is more virtual video game football. I mean, that does nothing for yours truly. I don't know what it does for you, but it does nothing for yours truly. You watched it? No, I watched some of these, like when I do an At Speed podcast, and I watch some of the, those races. And the first couple were pretty interesting, but the rest of them were like, no offense. And I know it takes, it doesn't take guts. It doesn't take guts to drive a race car when you're sitting in front of a computer screen. What makes it interesting is when, guys are out there putting it on the line, full speed. And that's what football is. It's funny because we were talking about contact tracing. I remember that great quote one time I heard. Bill Young was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State in the early under the John Cooper years. And he's out there when we used to get to go to practice, and he's out there and he's yelling at the players one day, and he goes, "God dang," but he didn't say God dang. He goes, "Basketball is a contact sport. Football is a collision sport. Hit somebody." And so this contact tracing, or as you'd call it in football, collision tracing, that's what separates it, man. We've always said that football is the most congregational, college football is the most congregational sport there is from the standpoint of the number of players involved, running into each other on every play, the number of fans in the stands, sitting around and yelling, et cetera. That's why it was always, and Kirk Herbstreit said this at the beginning of it, it's just hard to look forward and see that all getting taken care of to the satisfaction of everybody. And so that's where we're headed. We've kind of beat that dead horse, though.
I think there's absolutely. Let me throw this out there, Tim, just real quick. I'll be as quick as possible. The biggest hurdle right here that's still left, in my opinion, are the school presidents not taking any steps and announcing anything across the country about virtual learning or in-person learning. If they were truly committed to playing college football this year, and this goes in the exact opposite, flies in the face of what we heard in March and April, virtual learning and not having other students on campus would be the only way I could really see them having athletics.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Because we thought the other way around earlier.
Then you have a bubble.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. Why they were so opposed to this idea, student athletes are not treated like every other athlete on campus. They keep
Ever.
pretending like that's not the case and
I
that
know.
they're all the same. They're not the same.
I know, man. I've always, I'm out of the big line. I just wish they'd pull the covers back, I mean, why do you have to keep putting up? It's not a sham, but
It
it's
is
a
a
show.
sham. It
It's
is
a
a sham.
show. It's a production. Yeah. I mean, Justin Fields right now, he's thinking about several things. One of which is, am I going to get to play this season for Ohio State? If I do get to play, how is this going to affect whether I should go to the NFL, which we all believe. I'm just giving him as an example. And if I, and he, he's worried about passing his courses for sure. I think he's a serious student when it comes to that. But it's, this is this idea that it's all these, it's 85 college students who happen to want to play football. It's always boggled my mind. But I go along with it because I love college football, but you're exactly right. I mean, there was when I was an Alabama fan growing up, did I think Joe Namath, did I worry about what Joe Namath was getting in his, whatever his major was, commerce or whatever that was? Alabama had all these majors listed. One of them was commerce. I go, what the hell is commerce? Can you throw the ball 60 yards? That's what I want to know.
Justin Fields is the most valuable asset, at least in terms of enrolled students on Ohio State's campus. If you're not making exceptions for your most valuable students to keep them there, then you're doing the whole thing wrong in the first place.
Yes.
You and I understand it, and we've been around this sport long enough to know where some of the inaccuracies lie with the way they talk about students and the way they talk about college football and student athletics. I mean, that's fine. But that's why I say the last outstanding hurdle that they would have to clear, especially if you wanted to have a Big Ten conference basketball tournament in Indianapolis, you could form bubbles for these guys, but I'm not advocating that they will do that or that they should. But the barrier now is that the presidents of schools will not just say that these guys are valuable for us. They bring us tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and that they are not normal student athletes. They're not normal students. I can't even say. I'm so tripped up by how ludicrous it is that they won't just give up the game and say these guys deserve to be compensated, and then you can ensure that the sport actually continues to happen once you treat them that way.
Well, what you have to learn to do is what I've done a long time ago, just call them players, because they're players who happen to go to school and are required to pass courses. And, and they've done it, I'm not discounting that. I mean, Ohio State's done as great a job as anybody out there, especially in the last 20, 25 years of reinforcing, making sure these guys get their degrees, making sure they learn things, et cetera. I mean, I'm not discounting that at all, but we all know that the reason they go and recruit Zach Harrison and Justin Fields and Sean Wade is because they think these guys, first and foremost, can enhance their football team, and whether these guys go on to be great leaders of our society remains to be seen. I think those three guys I just mentioned, for example, have that capability also, but let's not lose sight of why they are there, what they mean, and like you said, and they, I think they do get special dispensation. It's just, you don't necessarily want to talk about that stuff all the time.
Right.
But anyway, go ahead.
There was a 5-star chemistry major who was making Ohio State $200 million, and they discovered the vaccine. Guess what? We would blow out the coverage for that kid on campus.
Yes, we would. Yeah.
But that's just not the case. So
what would he be? He'd be instead of a student athlete, he'd be a student chemist. What would he be? A student, huh?
Right. See, it doesn't apply anywhere else. They don't call him.
What he'd be, unless Ohio State got the trademark rights to it, he'd be a student millionaire, but that's a podcast for another day. But anyway, hey, Boston, thanks for joining me again. Real quick, man, just give me one tidbit people need to know about the football team. About, obviously we discussed on Lettermen Row, we had ad nauseum to a certain extent the defensive back situation last week. What's coming up this week? What should people be tuning in for?
Yeah, we're closing out. Somehow we've made it through 9 weeks, nine unit weeks strong. We've got the special teams left, so it's kind of a grab bag this week.
Yeah.
Really, it's crazy how much talent is on this roster. So you'd think that, everything would would lend itself to being the best kick return unit, best punt return unit, best field goal unit in the country, best punting unit in the country. And last year they had some really, really high highs and a couple points that were low. It's weird that they could still get better in that department. And so we're talking a little bit about that. And can Garrett Wilson take the next step as a punt returner? I was looking, Tim, it felt to me like Drew Chrisman took a little bit of a step back last year. The numbers don't bear that out at all. That his average in the net punting for Ohio State was actually up from 2 years ago. That surprised me. That's one thing I actually learned as I started to look back, because it just felt like, I don't know, maybe the standard's too high for Drew Chrisman at this point. It just didn't. There were weeks it just didn't feel like he was out there being himself. But you got him being one of the best punters in the country. Hobbiel really delivered some big kicks last year. If Garrett Wilson, I think that punting return drought for touchdowns, it's now back to 2014. I think he can be a guy to break it. So we'll talk about a lot of stuff like that.
And you've got the erstwhile Demario McCall still sitting out there. How will he figure? It's kind of interesting. The personnel they've got on hand, both old and young, who could just spice up this, especially the return teams. It is amazing how long it's been since there's been one of those, for a touchdown. But Drew Chrisman, back to him, maybe the little sense you had of him maybe falling off a little bit as the year near the end of the year last year was the fact that he was working on his passing game. You think that was it?
Yeah, you got to stay focused.
Dude, I think there are a couple things that make a coach feel more confident than usual going into a year. One is does he have the roots, the guts of his offensive line back, and Ohio State does, and does he have his kicker and punter back, who have proven themselves to be quite good. Yeah. And Blake Hallbile and Drew Chrisman are definitely those guys. Of course, there's going to be a new deep snapper. I think that's a big deal. Liam McCullough, man, go back. You talk about a guy that was near perfect for his stay at Ohio State. Crazy. Now he's in a Las Vegas Raiders uniform, which was cool to see. But right on down the line, those are the things that make you feel good as a coach.
Well, Liam McCullough, that is a big deal, and I'm trying to set up some stuff with him for this week to talk about that family dynasty that might be in place and what comes next. You got Rowan McCullough, so you know what works, right? If you got that 4 years of long snapping experience with that guy, maybe little brother can do the same thing.
The McCulloughs, man, don't mess with the McCulloughs. But I'll tell you what, I appreciate you joining me again, Boston. It's always a pleasure, man. And we'll be back next week with another Tim May podcast. And as I kind of leave off at the end of each podcast, maybe things will be a little more definitive then than they are now, because we always expected some gray area in this COVID-19 situation. You did too, right?
Yeah, it's not going to be perfect. And I think that I've said this before, it's helpful in a lot of ways that they can inform their decision based on what just happened with Michigan State and Rutgers.
Yeah, and what's going on with the Major League Baseball and what's going on with NFL camps opening. I mean, Ohio State, so far has not opened up its dressing rooms and a couple of other facilities at the Woody H. It's always been about guys coming in, doing their thing, getting their lunch, and leaving. And so the challenge is going to be when you actually open the locker rooms and guys are somewhere in proximity, how does it go then? And, it's always going to be these little tests. And what we found out, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be week to week, maybe day to day, on how the wind is blowing in this thing, as the Mary Poppins musical would show you. When the wind's blowing one way, you feel good. When it's blowing the other way, change is in the air. Yep. But, until next week, this is Tim May for Boston Ward. We'll see you then.